Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Ball Profits. My name is Rob Skudovic. Thanks for joining me tonight. We're going to do the start sit video for week 14 for many of that's the beginning of the playoffs. And to me, this is more important even than the waiver wire video at this point. A lot of you already have good benches. That's why you made the postseason. But now it's coming down to who you should start and sit. What we talked about in our waiver wire video, a lot of times people at this time of year, they get scared. They've been playing matchups all year, but then come the playoffs, they tend to roll with the big names. But it's important you continue playing matchups. That's what's going to win you a championship. Now, before we get into some of these games and talk about the start sit information that you may need to consider, we want to talk about something we're going to do here at Fantasy Ball Profits. It's a contest we're going to run, and we started after week 17. We're running through the actual football playoffs, and it's a fantasy football contest. It's free. It costs you nothing to enter. You have an opportunity to win some t-shirts, some jerseys. So stay tuned for that. Week 16, watch our video on the contest so that you can enter for a free opportunity to win some jerseys. Now, what we always try to do here is we try to give you solid information based on facts, numbers, statistics, player trends, information like that. We stay away from hunches or feelings. You know, every once in a while a hunch will pay off, but 9 times out of 10 it's going to blow up in your face. So if you stick to solid numbers, in the end you're typically going to be okay. Another thing we always tell you is we don't have your league information. I know your scoring, I don't know your league. I don't know your bench depth. I don't know some of these other factors you need to take into account. So you take this information, you need to contextualize it into your league. If you have specific questions for us in terms of players you may want to start or sit, if you put the questions at the bottom of the video, we'll go ahead and answer it in a timely manner. We'll try to get to it as soon as we can. One thing I would caution is try to get that information up before Sunday morning. I work Sunday morning from 9 to 12, and so try to get that in there before then. So let's get into the first game this week. The Saints versus the Falcons. Let's talk about the quarterbacks in this one. Drew Brees. Well, Atlanta gives up the 12th most points to quarterbacks. Well, Drew Brees is a Hall of Famer, great quarterback, and this could turn out to be a high-scoring game. There's certainly that possibility. Well, here's the concern that I have with starting Drew Brees. The Saints have an insane running game right now with Ingram and Kamara, and that really devalues Brees' value at this point. Now, he's a guy that you certainly need to play. You can't pass him up. He's too good to sit at this point, but you need to definitely lower his value. He would say something that you would start, and he's a safe play. He's not a great play this week, and so that's kind of where he's at. Still good quarterback, still good play for many of you, but he's not a great play simply because they run the ball so well. Matt Ryan in this game plays New Orleans. And New Orleans gives up the 15th fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, he had a nice 5-game stretch there. He played really well. And then last week, he was very quiet. I'm sure he disappointed a lot of you guys. But I think you need to consider, was that so much Matt Ryan that had a bad week, or was that the Vikings D that's so quality? I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Vikings defense right now is playing great in football. They're second in the league in the least amount of points allowed, only behind the Jaguars. And they're second in the league in the least amount of yards allowed, behind only the Jaguars. So right now the Vikings defense is sitting number 2 in all categories defensively. They're playing really, really well. So before that game, Matt Ryan had played really well for 5 games, and I think we can expect he's going to bounce back against the Saints this weekend. And so I would expect for him, you're going to expect maybe 250 yards, 2 TDs, maybe 1 interception is a line you can expect from Matt Ryan, especially if you consider the fact that he's playing at home. And in fact, if you look a little bit deeper in those statistics, if you look at the New Orleans last 3 games, last 3 quarterbacks that have faced the Saints have had over 20 fantasy points they've scored per game. So I think Matt Ryan is a safe start for you guys this week. Go ahead and start him. As far as running backs go, you got Devonta Freeman. He came back last week and he had a nice game. He had 12 carries for 73 yards. He had some really nice runs. He looked explosive. Looked like he's fully recovered from his concussion. Now he plays New Orleans, who got the 13th fewest points to running backs. I think what's going to see this week, you're going to see an increase in his carries and plays. I think this week he gets back in the pay dirt. I think he's going to score his touchdown. It's been a while. I think he gets back in the end zone this week. I'd say that Freeman is a good play. He's not a great play, but he sits as a back end running back 1 going into this weekend. As far as Tevin Coleman goes, he's a great play whenever Freeman's out. With him back, I'd say right now Coleman is nothing more than a flex option or running back 3 in deeper leagues. When I say deeper league, I mean 14 teams or more. That's kind of where he sits, Tevin Coleman out there. So you can play him, but I think for a lot of you, you'd be best not to. Mark Ingram. Let's take a look at Mark Ingram right now. Well, this week, Mark Ingram, he was held out of practice today because of a toe injury. Now, here's the advice they're given. If you look online, you study it. That's kind of a downgrade. He had limited practice yesterday. Today he didn't play at all. And that's possibly because this game is Thursday night and they might be just trying to lower his reps. Now, if Ingram plays, he's a must start. He's been playing so well. So watch the injury report come Thursday. If he plays, you need to play Ingram. As far as Kamara goes, this guy is insanely good. He's a must start. It doesn't matter who he plays. There's nothing to say at this point. Start Alvin Kamara. In fact, the only thing to really discuss at this point is how high he's going to get drafted next year. I can't wait to see where he lands on a lot of people's draft boards. So play Kamara. As far as the wideouts go in this game, let's look at Ted Ginn. He plays Atlanta, who gives up the 6th fewest points to wide receivers. Now, it's only once this year he's been targeted over 7 times in a game. He's not a great play. He's a wide receiver 4. I'd recommend sitting him in this matchup. Michael Thomas in this game. Now he's their number one wideout, and he takes a slight dip into wide receiver two from wide receiver one, I guess, to a wide receiver two category because of who he's playing. But he's still good enough that you need to play Michael Thomas in this matchup. Probably not a wide receiver one, like I said, falls into that wide receiver two category. Let's look at the Atlanta wide receivers. Let's look at Sanu. Well, Sanu plays New Orleans. They give up the 17th most points to wide receivers. Now, if you look at Sanu, he's only averaging 6 targets per game. He's only averaging 45 yards per game. So I'd say he's a wide receiver 4, and he's somebody I would sit this weekend. I wouldn't want to roll him out unless you're desperate for a play. And then Julio Jones. Now, Julio Jones last week got shut down. I know for a lot of you that was discouraging, but he played Xavier Rhodes. If you look at Xavier Rhodes, he's done that to a lot of good wideouts. A lot of the number one guys he has shut down. Right now, Julio Jones is far too talented to sit. You need to play him. So unless you've got Antonio Brown or Hopkins, which you don't, if you have Antonio Brown's, Hopkins, Julio Jones, I want to be in that league because obviously you drafted with a bunch of guys that are not very good at playing fantasy football. So unless you have those guys, you're always going to play Julio Jones. It doesn't matter who he's going up against. You need to start him. As far as tight ends go in this game, I would sit all tight ends. Fleener's out right now. Atlanta tight ends. If you look at Atlanta's tough against tight ends, so Hooper's not a great play. Fleener's not a great play, so I just sit all those guys. As far as kickers go, you could start Bryant and Lutz in this game. Both are good starts in this game. As far as defenses, I would sit both defense. They're bad plays this week. Let's look at the Bills and the Colts. Let's look at Jacoby Brissett in this one. Now, Jacoby is playing the Bills, who give the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, Jacoby had a 3-game stretch where he played well, looked like maybe he'd figured some things out. But besides that, he's really been below average at this point. He's somebody you need to stay away from, especially against the Bills defense. Don't play Jacoby. Tyrod going into this game is questionable. He's got a patella tendon bruise. Left the game injured. We don't know the extent of that. Obviously, it's not a tear. Sounds like he is questionable at this point. He's day-to-day. Now, the reports are leaning towards the fact he's probably not going to play this weekend. So it's really hard to trust him, even if he does play. How healthy is he? And then you add on the fact that Tyrod Taylor is just really questionable to begin with. He's up and down. He's had some great weeks, and all of a sudden he'll disappear. With all that said, I would sit Tyrod Taylor. And if he doesn't play and it's Peterman, we've already learned early in the year that you can't trust him anyway. So sit both quarterbacks for the Bills. As far as running backs go, you got Frank Gore in this one. Now, the Bills give up the most points to running backs. So if you look at Frank Gore, 34 years old, he's past his prime. He's not a great play, but he's got a wonderful matchup this weekend. And he's had double-digit carries every game this year except for once. And he's had 17 carries 3 consecutive weeks. And so I think Frank is a safe play with a low ceiling in this game. If you're looking, you can play him as kind of a running back too. Then you got LaShawn McCoy. Well, he's a running back 1 that you need to start, even if Tyrod Taylor sits. Now, if Tyrod Taylor sits, here's what's going to happen. The opposing teams will load the box. They're going to focus what they can to shut down that running game. And so you need to play McCoy regardless. But if Tyrod sits, he goes from a running back 1 to running back 2 status. Still, you need to start him, but he definitely lowers his value if that happens. As far as wideouts in this game, go get T.Y. Hilton. Now, I'm a T.Y. Hilton owner, and he's been difficult for me this year. He's so talented. But Jacoby really makes him hit or miss, and we've noticed this year he's had 3 great games, and then he's really disappeared in many others. Now he plays the Bills, who get the 14th fewest points to wide receivers. So here's what I would do: T.Y. Hilton. I would start him as a wide receiver 2-3. I personally own him in a 12-team league. It's a PPR league, and it's 12-team. I don't really trust him as a wide receiver 2 going into this week. I see him more as a wide receiver 3 for me, and so that's where I would tell you guys to let him fall in terms of where you're going to start him. As far as Moncrief goes, I would sit him. And there's no really wide receivers that you can trust for the Bills at this point, not even Benjamin if he comes back. Calvin Benjamin's not anybody that you can trust. And it's unfortunate because Indy is a great matchup for most wide receivers, but if you look at the quarterback situation, if you look at the wide receivers, they're not very talented, not very trustworthy. There's simply nobody on the Bills that you can trust this week in Week 14. I wouldn't start any Bills wide receivers. As far as tight ends go, you got Clay. Now, last week he was quiet in a decent matchup. And if you really look at it, he hasn't actually been that great this year. He hasn't scored since week 3, and he's only been over 100 yards once this year. And if you look at the last few games, he's really fallen back to a average tight end at best. So I would say right now, even though he's got a fair matchup, he sits around somewhere over the number 12. He's not top 12. I would sit him and look elsewhere if I was you. Jack Doyle is somebody you need to start in this game. The Bills are vulnerable to tight ends, and Doyle is Jacoby's favorite target, so you got to start Jack Doyle. He's a good start this weekend. As far as kickers go, Adam Vinatieri is a good start, and I would sit Stephen Hauschka in this game simply because, as we previously mentioned, the quarterback situation is up in the air. There's a lot of question marks there with that offense, so I would simply just not play him. As far as defense go, I would sit Indy, and the Bills are a safe start this week. The Bills are actually a good start, so I would start the Bills. The Bengals versus the Bears. Well, Mitch Trubisky, let's look at him. You need to sit him. As a rookie, he's just had so many struggles this year, and the Bengals defense is really good against the pass, so don't even think about starting Mitch Trubisky in this one. Last week, he had a great matchup. He only managed 102 yards and 1 TD, and so stay away from Mitch Trubisky. As far as Andy Dalton in this game goes, since week 2, his interception to touchdown ratio has been 20 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions. He's playing really well. Now, the Bears are actually good against the pass, so you need to kind of lower your expectations a little bit. Yet, I think Andy's still somebody that you can play. He's not a Tier 1 quarterback this week, but he falls into what I would say a Tier 2 category. If Mixon is out, and we'll have to wait and see, Mixon less last game with concussion, Mixon may not be back for this week, and that means that Bernard's going to start at running back, and that actually increases the value for Andy Dalton because Bernard is a very good pass catching back out of the backfield. So I think Andy Dalton for many is a guy that you could trust this week. And as far as running backs go, let's take a look at Jordan Howard. Now, Jordan Howard's been a boomer bust running back all year. Now he's playing the Bengals, who give up the 6th most points to running back. So this appeared to be a good matchup for Howard. But I would say he's kind of a risky play, especially if you're in a PPR league. He's not involved in the passing game very much. Now, 4 times this year he's had over 100 yards, but there's been a number of games where he's ended up in single-digit points for fantasy. And I think what's happening is, you all know, with Mitch Trubisky, a quarterback, a lot of defenses are not afraid of him. So what they do is they load the box and they focus on shutting down Jordan Howard. So that's kind of what you're going to need to think with him. If they fall behind early in this game, which often happens when the Bears play other teams, his role gets reduced. And so Jordan Howard probably is what I would say is a running back too. It's hard to pass him up because he is the bell call there. He does get a majority of the carries. He is the guy, but he does struggle with the fact he's often facing 8-man boxes at this point. Joe Mixon right now, as I mentioned earlier, is a concussion protocol. Most likely it looks like he's going to sit at this point. If he does play, he's a running back too. He's actually been playing better the last 2 games at 4.99 yards per carry. So you need to monitor that situation closely. If Mixon plays, I would go ahead and start him. He's looking better. He's got a decent matchup. If he sits, it's Giovanni Bernard, as I mentioned, and he would actually be a good play this week as a running back too, especially in PPR leagues. You boost his value. He played well last week in relief. Giovanni Bernard had 13 carries for 77 yards and 5.9 yards per carry, and so that, add the fact he's always a threat in the passing game, makes him a decent play if Joe Mixon is out. As far as wideouts go, A.J. Green is a start because he's A.J. Green. Last week he played the Steelers. Now the Steelers are very tough against the pass, and yet he still went out for 7 catches and 77 yards and 2 TDs. So you got to start A.J. Green. He's pretty much matchup proof for the most part. The Bears, you look at the Bears at this point, there's probably not any wide receiver you want to really consider to start there. You look at Brandon LaFell as a guy that you probably want to sit. There's really anybody besides Green at this point. Maybe somebody who would consider Dontrell Inman. Now, he's the number 1 wideout for the Bears, but he still only had 2 targets and 2 catches. He just doesn't have enough volume to really consider somebody that you could play. Doesn't have great quarterback play, on and on. I could give you a lot of reasons, but really, if you look at this game, look at wideouts, the only one that I'd even consider starting would be A.J. Green in this one. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the Bears tight ends. And Tyler Kroft is one that you could play. Now, if you study the Bengals the last few years, they really target their tight ends in the red zone. This year, Tyler's got 5 TDs and limited play, so he's what we call a touchdown-dependent tight end. He's a low-end play. I would say he falls in that category of a tight end round to 12 to 15. As far as kickers go, I would sit the Bears kicker. I would start kicker for Cincinnati this week. It's a good play, Bullock. As far as defense goes, sit the Bears and start the Bengals. The Bengals actually a very good defensive play this week if you're streaming one out there. Let's go to the Browns versus the Packers. DeShone Kizer. In fantasy terms, he's played better actually the last 5 weeks. He had double-digit points. Now he has Josh Gordon back. That's a huge boost. And when he plays Green Bay, who gives the 17th most points to quarterbacks, so this looks like maybe he's trending upward and this would be a good matchup, but I just need to caution you there. All things considered, he's still DeShone Kizer. He's still having a very bad year. You don't want to trust him in Week 14 when you need points out of your quarterback. As far as Brent Hundley goes, now he shocked everybody against the Steelers. He had that huge game, but if you take that game out of there, that was an anomaly. If you look at all the other games, he's had 2 touchdown passes to 8 interceptions, so he hasn't been good. I know the Browns are a bad team, but the Browns actually aren't bad against the pass. They're pretty quality against the pass, so sit Brett this week. As far as running backs go, let's look at Isaiah Crowell. Playing Green Bay gives up the 5th most points to running backs. Now, last week, Crowell didn't have a big game, but that was due mostly to the fact that they fell behind the Chargers and had to start throwing the ball. Now, he had limited carries, but in the limited carries he had, he looked pretty good. He looked strong, explosive, and that's actually 4 out of the last 5 games where he's actually looked well on the field. Now, the thing that's going to bode well for Isaiah Crowell is this game probably is not going to be a blowout. I don't think Green Bay is going to blow out the Browns. That Green Bay offense isn't great at this point, which is going to allow Crowell to stay in the game and get carries throughout the game. Don't be surprised to see him get 15 or 20 carries in this game. I'd say Crowell runs as a running back too, based on your league size. As far as Duke Johnson goes, I would sit him. There's just not enough volume there. He's not getting enough targets, enough carries to really trust in him. Now let's look at the Browns. Now the Browns allow the 7th fewest points to running back. So what about the Green Bay's running back situation? Let's look at Jamal Williams. Now I was a guy who's kind of been on him a little bit. I know some of you guys are giving me some pushback on this. I think he struggled in terms of effectiveness. Before last week, his yards per carry 3.2, and then last game he just blows up and has a huge game. So I'll humble myself to say I was surprised. He did great. He went out and had 21 carries, 113 yards, and 5.4 yards per carry. And he has averaged 20 carries the last 4 games. So everything would seem to be trending in the right direction for him, other than the fact he's got a tough matchup versus Cleveland, right? Well, there's one thing that we have to look in this and really have to take into account in this whole situation. Aaron Jones is back. Now, he was questionable going to last week whether he's going to play, and I think he was available, but they didn't play him a lot because he was still recovering from his MCL injury. He did end up entering the game. He did have 1 carry for 20 yards and a touchdown in overtime to win that game for them. And it was Jones early in the year that actually overtook Williams for that job and became the starting running back. And so that begs the question, with Williams looking better, played well last game, what's the distribution of carries going to look like? So I think here's what you need to do to figure out this running back situation, what you can trust. I would watch the coaches later on this week, especially come Thursday and Friday, and just begin to see what kind of feedback we get from the Green Bay camp. Any comments, anything that's going to maybe tip their hat in terms of what that distribution is going to look like. Unfortunately, it's starting to develop in what I would say that dreaded running back by committee at really the worst time of the year. As of right now today, here's how I see that. Right now today, I see Williams as a running back 3 and Jones as a running back 4 until we get a little more clarity in that situation. As far as wideouts in this game, Devontae Adams has been great. He's been good, even with Hundley at quarterback. Even though Hundley has struggled, Adams has maintained his numbers. In fact, his numbers actually have gone up since he's taken over. So Adams is a great play. Now, the Browns allow 11 fewest points to wide receivers, so I would say Adams is a good play as a wide receiver 2. As far as Jordy Nelson, you need to sit him until Aaron Rodgers comes back. And there are reports that Aaron Rodgers may be available in Week 15. So all of you out there, you may want to consider picking up Jordy Nelson. He's been dropped. He was one of his favorite targets. He was playing really well. He had a lot of touchdowns before Rodgers went down. Since Rodgers went down, Jordy Nelson has disappeared. So don't even consider playing him this week. Now, the Packers give up the 5th most points to wide receivers. So who do you start for Cleveland out there? Well, right now I would say don't even consider. I would sit Corey Coleman. But I would start Josh Gordon as a wide receiver 2. Last week he came out, hadn't played in over 2 years, had 4 catches for 85 yards. He looked very good. Now, at times he looked fatigued. That's expected. He hasn't played in a while, so he looked a little fatigued at times. And he was facing Casey Hayward, which is one of the top corners in the league. Yet if you watch the game, he still showed speed, separation, had good hands. He just needs to get that timing down with Kaiser. All things considered, Josh hasn't lost anything. He's only 26 years old. Next year, unless something happens in the offseason, he gets suspended again. If he keeps himself clean, Josh Gordon will be a top 10 wide receiver going into next season. He'd look great. Start him as a wide receiver too. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the Green Bay tight ends. And I would consider maybe starting David Njoku. Now, he plays Green Bay, gives up the 4th fewest points to tight ends, but he looked good last week. He had 4 catches, 74 yards, and a TD. He's very athletic. He's a gifted tight end. It's going to help that he's going to have Gordon there to take pressure off him. Obviously, the safeties won't be able to focus on him. They're going to start to focus on Gordon in that offense. And so I would say Njoku falls into around a tight end number 12, that ranking there. So you can play him, but probably want to consider him only in the deeper leagues. As far as kickers go, I would sit Zane Gonzalez. Crosby looks like a good play on paper here as a kicker, but if you take a look at it, he's only had 1 game where he's at over 10 points per game in terms of fantasy. They're playing in Cleveland. There might be weather issues. There's been quarterback struggles. There's just so many question marks for that Green Bay offense that I would sit Crosby. I would sit the Bears defense, and I would start the Packers defense. Right now, the Browns give the 2nd most points to defenses. So sit the Browns, and start the Packers. Chiefs versus the Raiders. Start both Alex Smith and Derek Carr in this game. Both of them need to be started. If you look at Smith, he blew up last time they played. In fact, last week, Smith blew up. He'd been struggling for a few weeks there, and last week he goes off for 366 yards and 4 TDs. Now he plays the Raiders, who give the 10th most points to quarterbacks. Last time he played Oakland, he ended up having 342 yards and 3 touchdown passes. So everything would say that Smith is a guy that you need to start this weekend. Now the Chiefs give up the 6th most points to quarterbacks. So Derek Carr this week is going to get Crabtree back. Maybe Cooper back. We'll see. how that goes, although he's not progressing real well in concussion protocol at this point. Hopefully he'll get him back. Now, last time Cooper played, he had a huge week. He had that's the week that Cooper had over 200 yards. And Derek Carr against Kansas City last time he played had 417 yards and 3 touchdown passes. So both these quarterbacks, Smith and Carr, are great plays this week. As far as running backs go, let's look at Hunt. Now, he's really had a drop in production. Now he's playing Oakland, who gives up 13th most points to running backs. Now he's hit the rookie wall, as they say. If whatever it is, there's been a drop off. I don't know if teams have adjusted. I don't know if it's been difficult for him. I don't know really what's going on there. But here's the thing with Hunt. He's still the lead back, and he's still using the passing game. So you still need to start him as a running back too, even though I know he's had a drop in production. I know for a lot of you that's been discouraging, whatever you want to say, but you still need to start him as a running back too in this game. Let's take a look at Marshawn Lynch in here. Kansas City is tough against the run, but Lynch has found his legs lately. He's running with a lot more authority. He's back into beast mode. So Lynch is a guy that I think moves into that running back 2 conversation. He's had 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. His yards per carry rose dramatically. He's being used in the passing game. Everything's boding well and trending well for Marshawn Lynch, so I would start him as a running back 2 in this matchup. I would sit all other running backs. Richard, Washington, don't even consider them. They don't get enough volume carries or targets to even consider. As far as wideouts in this game go, you got Tyreek Hill. He's their number 1 wideout for Kansas City, but he does get lower targets and volume, which makes him inconsistent at times. But he's still good, and we saw that last week because he went off for 6 catches for 185 yards and 2 TDs. Now, last time he played the Raiders, he had 6 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown. No one else in the Kansas City team is worth to be trusted, but you need to start Hill in this game. Mari Cooper, now once again, he's in concussion protocol. We don't know if he's going to be back in time. Everything seems to point to the fact that he's probably not going to play in that game. But if he does play, you need to start him. Last time he played Kansas City, he had 11 catches, 210 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So just keep an eye and see what he does. If he plays, start him without hesitation. Crabtree is going to be in this game. He's already been activated from his suspension. He's going to play. You need to start Crabtree. And here's what I'd say about Crabtree. If Cooper plays, Crabtree is a wide receiver 2 in this matchup. If Cooper sits, Crabtree becomes a wide receiver 1 with huge volume. He could have a huge game in this one right here. Another guy to consider, if Cooper doesn't play, Cordell Patterson is a guy that you could roll out as a wide receiver 3 to 4, depending upon your league size and scoring. Last week, he went out and had 4 catches for 97 yards. So this is another tricky play. If you're looking for somebody as a sleeper out there, keep an eye on Cooper. If he sits, you could go with Cordell Patterson in this one. As far as tight ends go, start Travis Kelce. That's a no-brainer. And Cook. Last time Cook played Kansas City, he exploded. Now, if you really study, Kansas City is actually fairly good against tight ends. In fact, they give the 3rd fewest points to tight ends. So should you play Cook? He's been quiet the last 2 weeks, yet last time he played Kansas City, he was pretty huge. So what I would probably say at this point is that he's a guy that you could probably start. I would imagine that Cook struggles the last 2 weeks with the fact that Cooper and Crabtree are out and defenses were able to focus on them. With Crabtree back to take a little pressure on him, I think Cook is a fair end play. I would say a low-end tight end start at this point. I would start Butker in this game. And I would sit Trevecchio, the kicker, and I would sit both defenses. Neither one of these defenses are worth a play in this game. Cowboys versus the Giants. Eli Manning is back after 1 game. He started again. A lot's happened there for the Giants. They fired their coach, GM. The whole thing's a mess right now. Now he's playing Dallas, gives up the 8th most points to quarterbacks. So what do? Can you start Eli? Well, first of all, they haven't fixed anything. This whole team is still a mess. Odell Beckham is still gone. Marshall is still gone. So even though he's playing a struggling Cowboys team, I don't feel like you can trust him in this game. If you look at last time Eli played them in week 1, he had 220 yards passing, 0 touchdown passes, 1 interception, and only got 6.7 fantasy points. So there's so many reasons why I would stay away from Eli Manning in this one at this point. As far as Dak Prescott goes, he plays the Giants. He'll give up the 4th most points to quarterbacks. Now, Dak Prescott has really fallen on some hard times lately. Now, a lot of people are probably encouraged from the way he performed last week. He did have 2 touchdown passes and 0 interceptions. But if you take a look at it, he only had 102 yards passing, so there's still reason for concern there. Yeah, it was great. I was happy he had 2 touchdown passes, no interceptions, but 102 yards passing is very concerning. I don't think they resolved a lot of their issues there. What's going on is that offensive line is still beat up. Ezekiel Elliott is really hurting that team. We just see how valuable he was. Play action doesn't seem to have the same effect it once did. They're playing in New York. That's a tough rivalry. They're going to always play each other tough. So there's a lot of reasons why I'd say that I would probably stay away from Dak unless you're in very deep leagues. He's a very low-end start with a lot of risk to it. I would stay away from Dak Prescott. As far as running backs in this game go, you got Alfred Morris. Well, you look at the New York Giants, give it the 15th most points to running backs. Last Thursday, he had a great game, 27 carries, 127 yards, and a touchdown. Since he's taken over running back since Ezekiel Elliott's been suspended, his yards per carry have been very healthy at 4.8. There's a lot of things about him that you can like, so I would definitely start Alfred Morris as a running back too. Now, the one concern I have with Alfred Morris and what we've seen and why he didn't have a lot of volume and why he didn't have great numbers early is if the Cowboys happen to fall behind early, and I don't think that they will against the Giants, but if they do, what happens is that Alfred Morris tends to disappear because he's not good in the passing game. That gives Rod Smith value, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think you'll see a heavy dose of Alfred Morris, maybe 20-25 carries in this game, so go ahead and start him as a running back too. I would sit Rod Smith. He only has value in the passing game. That's only if they fall behind, so I don't see him getting enough volume to trust this weekend. So let's look at Orleans Darkwa. Is somebody that you could start. Well, last week he saved his day by having a touchdown, but the last 2 weeks he's really taken a step backwards in terms of effectiveness, of yards, whatnot. Now he's playing Dallas, who's kind of the middle of the road defense in terms of points allowed to running backs. So where does he fall in this? Well, the one thing about Dark was he's still their lead back. Okay, and I think in a game like this, New York's going to try to establish the run, take pressure off of Eli, and so in deeper leagues you could start him. I would say he sits as about a running back 3 at this point. As far as wideouts in this game go, you got Dez Bryant. Last week, Dez Bryant had a touchdown, 61 yards, but he's not having a great year right now. He's down. He's not the Dez Bryant of old. His yardage totals are lower. In fact, he's not broken over 100 yards this year receiving. That's concerning. Now he's playing the New York Giants, who give the 11th most points to wide receivers. So where does Dez fall in all this? He's playing a pretty good matchup-friendly Giants, yet he's not having a great year. Well, I'd say Dez Bryant falls into a wide receiver 3 category. Too talented to sit at this point, but certainly not the Dez of old where you can bump him up to wide receiver 1 category. He's a wide receiver 3. Until we see Dak Prescott improve, until we see more from this offense, you really can't trust him more than that. I would sit all other Dallas wide receivers. Look at the Dallas Cowboys. They gave the 3rd most points to wide receivers. So now you have Sterling Shepard. Now, Sterling was kind of quiet last week, but he's played very well with Eli at quarterback. So Eli coming back is a huge boost for Sterling Shepard. In fact, you look at some of the numbers he put up. He had 5 catches for 40 or 70 yards. He had 11 catches for 142 yards before he had the migraines, and he missed a couple games. He's a very talented second-year wideout. He's a really only legit wideout they have in that system there. And so I'd say this week with Eli Manning back, Sterling Shepard is wide receiver 2, somebody that you can feel comfortable starting. As far as the tight ends go, you need to start Evan Ingram. Now, we predicted that he would rebound with Sterling Shepard back. I think what happened for a couple games there is Evan Ingram is really the old guy they had in that offense that was a passing threat, and so defense were able to focus on him. They would bring over safety, they would drift coverage over there, do things like that. Really gave him a lot of attention, but with Sterling Shepard back, they couldn't do that, and sure enough, he rebounded with a good game. He had 7 catches, 99 yards, and a TD, and so this is a huge boost for him. He's a very talented tight end. In fact, don't be surprised in a lot of preseason rankings next year that Evan Ingram is top 5 in tight end rankings. He's going to be way up there. He's got Kelsey and Gronk-like talent, so he's a guy that you can start and feel comfortable with. Jason Witten in this game, the other tight end I consider, plays the New York Giants, who give the 2nd most points to tight ends. First time they played, Witten did really well against him. He had 7 catches, 59 yards, and a touchdown. So can you play him? I think you need to play him in this game. I think he's going to get a lot of targets. We have to remember, though, he's not the Witten of 5 years ago. So I think he's got a good play. He's got a good matchup, but don't expect him to go off for 10 catches and 100 yards. I would safely say 5 catches, 65 yards, and a TD is what you could expect out of Witten in this game. As far as the kickers go, I would start Bailey. I'd sit Rosas. Neither defenses are good plays. If you had to pick a defense of the 2, I would go with Dallas. They're slightly better, but they're not a great play. Lions versus the Buccaneers. Let's look at Stafford at this point. Right now he's questionable. He's got a sore, badly bruised hand. So came out of the game, some people feared he might have had a broken hand. He didn't return after he left, but they went ahead and did x-rays. It's not broken, so that's good. It is bruised. It is sore, but there is a chance he could play. Now, if he starts against Tampa Bay gives up a lot of points to quarterback, so if Matthew Stafford is able to go, you need to start him. It's a good play for him this week. As far as Winston in this game, now he returned Sunday after being shut down for 3 weeks with a sore shoulder, and he went out and he threw 270 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, if you take a look at the 7 games that he's played, now he's been in 9 total games, but 2 of them he left early with shoulder injuries. But if you look at the 7 games where he started and completed the games, 4 of the 7 he's thrown for over 300 yards. And I think another thing that I like about Winston in terms of fantasy, he may not be a great quarterback down the stretch, but he's a great fantasy quarterback, And here's why he's great. Tampa Bay's defense is brutal. They allow a lot of points, which means the Tampa Bay offense constantly has to throw the ball to play from behind, so you're going to get a lot of garbage time points. Actually like Winston down the stretch here. I like who he's playing. Plays Detroit, who's fair in terms of allowing points to quarterbacks. If you take a look last week, Flacco, who's not a great quarterback, actually moved the ball fairly well against him. So Winston is a guy that you can start in this game and feel pretty good about that. The running backs in this game, let's look at Tampa Bay. It gives up the 8th most points to running backs. So should you start like Amir Abdullah? He's got a decent matchup against Tampa Bay. Like I said, 8th most points allowed to running backs. Well, right now Amir's questionable. Now he has struggled all year, 3.4 yards per carry. Honestly, I've never been a big fan of him. He's a smaller, quicker back. He just simply isn't a 3-down back. He'd be better suited to be a 3rd-down back, change of pace back coming off the bench. If he plays, I would say that he's somebody you'd have to look at as maybe a running back 3 in a good matchup. If you're looking for a running back to play in this game for the Lions, here's what I think would be the best scenario for the Lions and for fantasy owners out there. I think it'd be better that Amir sits and they start Tion Green last week. He looked pretty good. He's 5'11", 220 pounds. He's a big physical back, and he ran well. He had 11 carries, 51 yards, and a touchdown. Turns out to be 4.6 yards per carry. I think he's a better back than Amir. The problem with it is if Amir plays, you can't trust Tion Green at this point. They're going to split carries. Not even worth it. So if Amir plays, start him as a running back 3. Probably a better option out there is that he sits and Tion Green gets another start. I know some of you think that's a little risky because it's only his 2nd game that he's been activated, but I think that you can kind of trust at this point that he will have decent game out there. As far as Theo Riddick goes, I would only start Theo Riddick if Amir sits and only in PPR leagues. Now let's take a look at Detroit. Detroit gives with the 4th most points to running backs. So let's look at Doug Martin in this game. He sat out last week. He was out with concussion. Even if Martin plays in a good matchup, I would say he's no higher than a running back 4. He's been struggling, getting worse and worse. The guy that I like to see in this game, it was Peyton Barber. Now, with him out last week, Barber went out, had 23 carries, 102 yards. He had 4 catches for 41 yards. He looked great. Peyton Barber's a guy out there that I really like. He's a big physical back out of Auburn, 5'11", 225 pounds. And we actually saw this coming. We've been talking for a couple weeks now. We thought maybe Jacquez Rogers would be the one to take over. We could just see that Martin was struggling, yards per carry dropping. He was just very ineffective. And it was just a matter of time before that team made a switch. And of course, then he gets a concussion. It makes it easy for them to go to another back. So even if Martin comes back, I really don't see a need for the team to go back to him. If you take a look at Martin as a whole, just kind of stop for a second, kind of park on him and talk about where he's at a little bit. Martin's been in the league 5 years going into this year. Now, 2 of the years he had really good years, and then 3 of the years he had bad years. 2 seasons he averaged 1,428 yards for a healthy 4.71 yards per carry. But the other 3 seasons he only averaged 475 yards a season for a woeful 3.39 yards per carry. And then going into this year, he's struggling again. This year he's got 3.2 yards per carry, so he's really trending downward. And so he's a guy that if he comes back, I don't see a whole lot of value. Hopefully he misses another game, and then people out there that are looking for a running back to pick up can go with Peyton Barber. I think he's the guy that you want to roll with. So watch the injury reports, watch the coaches' comments in terms of what they see regarding Martin and Barber in that running back situation. Thursday, Friday, we'll get a lot more clarity in terms of what that's going to look like for all of us heading into the weekend. As far as the wideouts go, Detroit gives up the 15th fewest points to wideouts. Mike Evans, got to start him because he's Mike Evans. He's a great wideout, and it's good that Winston is back. Winston's not afraid to feed him targets, so that's certainly good. Now, the one concern I have right now for Evans this year, he hasn't broke 100 yards. His last touchdown was in week 7, so he's a low-end wide receiver 1, but he's got too much potential to drop farther than that. So you got to start Mike Evans, but you may want to lower your expectations. He has struggled a little bit this year. As far as Jackson goes, Deshaun Jackson, I would sit him. He only had value when Evans was out. He's a wide receiver 4. Now, as far as the wide receivers for the Lions, a lot depends on Stafford. Obviously, if Stafford's out of the game, that lowers their value considerably. Now, if Stafford plays, Tampa Bay gives up the most points to wide receivers. And so Tampa Bay is very vulnerable to wide receivers. So if Stafford plays, I would say Golden Tate sits as a wide receiver 2 this weekend. He's got a great matchup. If Stafford sits, I would say Tate's downgraded to wide receiver 3. Then look at Marvin Jones Jr. Even a tough matchup last week, he went out and had a good week. He had 90 yards receiving. And so with Matthew Stafford in there this week, Jones is a wide receiver 1. Without Stafford, he becomes a wide receiver 2 in a great matchup. As far as tight ends go, Detroit gives up the 12th most points to tight end. So Brate returned last week, and when he didn't, he'd been quiet for a few weeks. They returned last week and had 2 touchdowns. He given 6 touchdowns on the year. Now, if you take a look at it, when Winston's been at quarterback, Cameron Brate has looked very good. He's been very consistent. So as long as Winston's the quarterback there, I'd feel comfortable starting him. When he's out for whatever reason, they just don't tend to look his way very often. He disappeared. As far as Howard goes in this game, his value drops with Winston's return, so he's not worth a start. I would sit Eric Ebron. Tampa Bay gives up the fewest points to tight end, so I don't even consider Eric Ebron in this matchup. I would start both kickers in this game. Prater and Murray are both starts. I would sit both defenses. Vikings versus the Panthers. Let's take a look at this game. So we got Case Keenum playing the Panthers to give up the 10th fewest points to quarterbacks. Yet, if you look at it, the Panthers have actually shown themselves to be a little more vulnerable to passing lately. If you look at Case Keenum, he's had 5 good weeks in a row, and it's time for me, a Vikings fan, like I said. I've talked about it often. Love my Vikes doing well, 10-2, best record in the NFL, tied with a few other teams. Was very hesitant, I'm not going to lie. When he took over quarterback, I didn't feel very good about the future. He looked like he was just a journeyman, but I'm not going to lie. Last 5 weeks, this guy has really come along. He's really looking good. During that stretch, he's had 11 touchdown passes, only 3 interceptions. And so he's a guy that you can start. But here's what I would say. He's got what I would call a safe floor but a low ceiling. He's a guy I think that you can trust out there to be a decent play and not a great play in this game against the Panthers. As far as Cam Newton in this game, now, last year when the Vikings played the Panthers, they shut him down. He threw 3 interceptions, and he had a quarterback rate of 47.6. Now, he's obviously going to do better than that just simply because Cam Newton's more talented. He's not going to continue to put out bad games like that. But the Vikings defense is actually playing better this year than they were last year, so it doesn't bode well. I think that Cam Newton is a very risky play for many of you out there. If you can look elsewhere, I would look elsewhere and try not to start Cam Newton this weekend. As far as running backs in this game go, the Vikings give the fewest points to running backs, so you need to sit Stewart. He struggled all year, 3.2 yards per carry. Go ahead and sit Stewart. Don't even bother. And as far as McCaffrey in this game, I would only start him if you're in a PPR league. He does have value to use him a lot in the passing game, but beyond that, I would not start him if you're in a standard league. Now, the Panthers give the 5th fewest points to running backs. So let's look at Jerick McKinnon. Now, he salvaged his day last week. I know a lot of you wanted to start him. We advised against it. He did get a touchdown, but his overall numbers weren't good, continuing trending downwards in terms of his value there. His carries have been dropping. In fact, he ended up in single-digit carries last week, and that had been the first time in a while. I would only start Jerick McKinnon if you're in a PPR league, or if you're in a very deep league at this point, I would shy away from him. Latavius Murray, let's look at him. Well, he's been playing very well lately. 6 weeks, he had double-digit carries. And since week 7, his yards per carry have been going up. But I have to downgrade him this week against the Panthers, who are tough against the run. I would say that Latavius Murray sits as a running back 3 this week. As far as wideouts in this game go, you got Devin Funchess. He's played really well since the Benjamin trade. He's looked great. Now, this week, he's going to see Xavier Rhodes. Now, we talked about him earlier in the video. Xavier Rhodes has shut down opposing teams' #1 wideouts time and time again. This last week, he shut down Julio Jones. So I think you got to take a look at where he's. I would say Devin sits as wide receiver 3 this week. You're still going to start him because he's their go-to guy there, but don't expect Devin to do what he's done the last few weeks. Expect a lot lower numbers for him. Let's look at the Panthers. Now, the Panthers give the 12th most points to wide receivers. So look at Stephon Diggs. Now, I like Stephon Diggs. I think he's very talented. I think when he's healthy and on the field and he's getting targets, he has a lot of talent. But since Adam Thielen has emerged on that team, Adam Thielen has really become the #1 wide receiver the last few weeks. And that's a major drop in Diggs' value. So I would say this week against solid Panthers D, I would see Stephon Diggs as a wide receiver 4. Adam Thielen is wide receiver 1. Now, he's not 10-10 this week because the Panthers defense is pretty solid, so he drops out of the top 10, but he's still a #1 wideout at this point. Adam Thielen is a guy that you need to start. As far as tight ends in this game go, let's look at Greg Olsen. Now, last week he sat out because his foot hurt. Here's what they decided to do. He had that broken foot of his. He came back the first week, played a little bit, got sore. They pulled it from him. Then last week they had him not play because they played on artificial turf. Now, they've got 3 games coming up where they're going to be on actual grass, a little bit softer surface there. So they're going to let him play in those games. But I still think it's scary to start him at this point. I need to see him get out there for a full game. I need to see that he's productive and that foot is okay. I wouldn't even bother starting him this week. I think there's just too much at risk, too many question marks out there. I'd stay away from Greg Olsen. As far as Kyle Rudolph goes, he's had 3 TDs in 2 weeks, but if you take a look at his entire year, he's had low yardage totals, low catch, and low targets. Now you look at the Panthers, they're very good against tight ends. In fact, they allow the 2nd fewest points to tight ends, so I would sit Kyle Rudolph. because he's basically tight end or he's touchdown dependent at this point. So I would say Kyle Rudolph, if you have to start him, he's a low end tight end start. Keep your expectations low in that one. As far as kickers go, both kickers in this game are fair plays. They're not great plays, but they're guys that you can trust to be decent. And really, both defenses are worth a start. Now, the one thing I want to say is the Minnesota defense is playing lights out. They're playing great football right now, but for whatever reason, those numbers haven't equated necessarily to great fantasy defensive numbers. If you look at the overall defensive numbers in real football terms, they've been wonderful. But in fantasy numbers, it hasn't always equated, but I still think they're worth a start this week. Let's look at the 49ers and the Texans. So let's look at quarterbacks. San Francisco allows the third most points to quarterbacks. Now, Tom Savage had 21 points last week against the Titans. Now he's facing San Francisco, who's, like I said, allows the third most points to quarterbacks. So I think he's a decent play. For those that need a 1 week plug and play, maybe your guy's injured, maybe your guy out there waiting for Aaron Rodgers to come back in week 15, whatever that might be, Tom Savage is actually not a bad plug and play this week. Anybody who has Hopkins on there, Hopkins makes a lot of quarterbacks look good. So you could start him. He's down there once again. He's not top 10, not top 15 even, but he's a guy that if you're in a deeper league, maybe you have to start 2 quarterbacks, you could do Tom Savage. Let's look at Houston. Now, Houston allows the most points to quarterbacks. Now, they're playing Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo had his first start last week, and he actually looked decent. All things considered, if you look at that offense, the fact he first time had Ryan, the fact they don't have great weapons around him, Jimmy Garoppolo looked pretty good. He threw for 293 yards. I would say, and he did that against a pretty tough Chicago pass defense. So just like Savage, I would say Jimmy Garoppolo is a decent 1 week plug and play if you're somebody that's looking for a deeper quarterback out there. If you're in a team that needs, or in a league that starts 2 quarterbacks, he's somebody that you could roll with. As far as running backs in this game go, the Texans give up the third fewest points to running backs. So you look at Carlos Hyde, he's still contributing, he's still getting carries, he's still the #1 guy there, but he's been fairly quiet. He hasn't scored since week 6. And he hasn't broke 100 yards. You have to go all the way back to week 2. He did it once this year. So Carlos Hyde is downgraded to running back 3 in this game. Now let's look at San Francisco. San Francisco gives up the second most points to running backs. So Lamar Miller is a good start. He's a solid running back to play this weekend. As far as wideouts go, you need to start Hopkins. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. He's a wide receiver 1. He's a stud. You look at the other wideouts for Houston. Ellington went in the IR. Fuller most likely is going to miss. He's still questionable, so don't even start any other Houston wide receivers. There's none that you could trust there. As far as San Francisco goes, Marquise Goodwin is a guy that you could probably start. He had a nice week last week. He had 8 catches, 99 yards. And if you look at his last 4 weeks, his yardage totals have been 68 yards, 83 yards, 78 yards, and 99 yards. So he's actually become more productive. He's going to certainly benefit from Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback there. You could start him as a wide receiver 3. Another guy you may want to consider out there that's kind of a sleeper, which would be Taylor, wide receiver for San Francisco. Last week he had 6 catches, 92 yards, and they're playing Houston, who gives the 6th most points to wideouts. He's a smaller slot receiver. He looked nice at times in limited play. I think you're going to see a bump in his value with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. He's a deep play in deeper leagues. I would say he sits as a wide receiver 4 going into this week, and he's a sleeper pick. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the San Francisco tight ends. CJ Federitz is on the IR. He, I think, got another concussion, so it sounds like he's going to be done for the year. That leaves Steven Anderson, who's actually played well. Last week he had 5 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown. Now he plays San Francisco, gives up the 12th fewest points to tight end. So Stefan is a fair play this week. He's not a great play. As far as kickers go, I would start Gould, and actually both kickers in this game are both kickers that you could feel comfortable starting. I would sit both defense, and neither one of those defense are even worth considering in this game. Jets and the Broncos. So we got quarterbacks. Well, Denver gives up the 14th fewest points to quarterbacks. This Broncos defense is not the defense of last year or even the previous years. They've really slipped. The team's really starting to fall apart. The wheels seem to be coming off that organization at this point, so they are vulnerable. They did play Josh McCown in this game. He's played well. In fact, he's over 300 yards passing the last 2 weeks. On the year, has 18 touchdown passes to only 8 interceptions. The thing that's really helped him too is Robbie Anderson has emerged into a legitimate wide receiver 1 stud on that team. That's been huge. So in the right situations, he's worth a start. So depending upon what your needs are, Josh McCown's not a bad play in this game. Trevor Siemian in this game has got a great matchup versus the Jets. They give a lot of points to quarterbacks. I don't really care how many they give up. Trevor Siemian is not somebody you want to go with. He's getting worse and worse. Since week 2, his touchdown to interceptor ratio has been 11-5. He's had 5 touchdown passes to 11 picks. The offense is getting worse and worse. Like I said, the wheels seem to be coming off of that team, so stay away from Trevor Siemian. I don't care how good of a matchup this is for him. Don't take your chances there. It's not worth the risk. As far as running backs in this game go, the Jets give up the 6th fewest points to running backs. And so So right from the get-go, the Jets are tough against run. Now you take a look at Anderson, Charles, and Booker. Can you start any one of those guys? And really what you have, there's a running back by committee. I really can't trust that situation for a lot of reasons. One, excuse me. The quarterback play of Trevor Siemian is not very good. The Jets are good against the run. Last week, Anderson looked better, but if you're going to break it down, what you'll find is really that's just been a right across the board running back by committee share. 1 week Booker's looked good, then 1 week Charles had carries. Anderson looked good last week. It's just scary. I would really sit away. If you have to pick 1 of 3, if you have to roll with one, I would say Anderson the one maybe to go with at this point. But if I was you, I would stay far away from that. Let's look at Denver. Denver gives up the 9th fewest points to running back. So is there anybody there that you could start in this game? Well, let's take a look at Forte and Powell. That's another one that's a running back by committee. Another scary situation for me in a tough matchup. Now, when you look at this, Matt Forte, if you're going to look at the two running backs there, Powell and Forte, Forte gets a goal line carries, and they use him a lot in the passing game. So if you have to start somebody, Matt Forte is your guy to go with, and he plays as a running back 3 this weekend. As far as wide receivers in this game goes, Denver gives up the 3rd fewest points to wideouts. So I talked about Robbie Anderson lately. He's become a stud. He's got 7 touchdowns on the year. He's had over 100 yards receiving 3 of the last 5 games. He does have a tougher matchup, though, so he's downgraded to wide receiver 2 this week. As far as Kearse go, now Kearse has had 2 huge weeks. 2 weeks in a row, he had 7 catches, 105 yards, and 9 catches, 157 yards. But that was purely matchup play. Don't get too excited by that, and a lot of people are going to run out there, pick him up. But he had great matchups in games where they had to throw the ball a lot. So he's going to come back down to earth this week. I think you'd be lucky if you get 5 catches, 75 yards would be reasonable. He's a wide receiver 3 to 4, depending upon your league size there. Look at the Jets. The Jets give them the 7th most points to wideouts. So the Jets are very vulnerable to wide receivers. 7th most points they allow. Let's look at Demaryius Thomas in this one. Demaryius Thomas has really fallen on hard times. Look at the last 2 weeks. He's at a total of 45 yards. Now, he did have a 3-week stretch with Trevor, quarterback there, that he had touchdowns. He has a lot of talent. Demaryius Thomas has been a great wide receiver in the league. But this week, if you look at Trevor, quarterback, he's no better than a wide receiver 3, and even that is a bit of a stretch at this point. Look at Emmanuel Sanders. He's had some real brutal weeks lately. He's a wide receiver 4. I would not advise starting him at this point until they get a new quarterback there. As far as tight ends go, I would sit all Denver tight ends. And look at the Broncos. The Broncos allow the 3rd most points to tight ends. So Austin Seferian-Jenkins is probably going to rebound this week. He's got a very good matchup. He stands about a tight end around the 8 to 10 rankings as far as tight ends go. As far as kickers go, I would sit Catanzaro, and I'd start Catanzaro and I would sit McManus. Both defenses are low-end plays in this game. They're not bad, both of them that you can play, but they're low-end. Don't expect a lot from them. Tight ends versus the Cardinals. Let's take a look at Marcus Mariota. He plays the Cardinals to give allow the 5th most points to quarterbacks. Now, Marcus has really struggled all year. Now, the thing that may help him this week, he might get Rashard Matthews back. That'd be a huge bump for Mariota. Now, what's saved Mariota's fantasy year? What's kept him in that fantasy talk as far as a quarterback you can consider starting is his legs. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns on the year, so he has struggled in the passing game, but he's had 5 rushing touchdowns. So you can start Marcus Mariota, but I have lower expectations if I was you. Let's look at Blaine Gabbert here. Now, he plays Tennessee. Blaine does. Tennessee gives the 13th most points to quarterbacks. Blaine's actually done pretty well against some tough defense he's faced. He faced the Jags and the Rams, and those are both very good defenses. And during that stretch, he had 6 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions, which doesn't seem impressive. But if you look at how he's played against those very tough defenses, he's actually looked pretty good. So he's not a bad 1-week plug-and-play if you're somebody out there that's desperate for a quarterback out there. He's a guy that you can roll with this week and feel okay in deeper leagues. Let's look at running backs now. The Cardinals give up the 11th fewest points to running backs. So let's look at DeMarco Murray. He had a decent rebound game last week. Finally, he had 11 carries, 66 yards. His yards per carry were pretty good. But before that, he had struggled for 6 consecutive games. He looked worse and worse. The one thing that he has going for him, he sees the targets in the passing game, and he gets the goal line carries. In fact, he's had 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. Then you look at Derrick Henry in that matchup. Now, Derrick Henry's actually ran well, but he's been limited. The team doesn't want to give him for whatever reason. They've been limiting his carries. He's not using the passing game. But he has been the most effective of the 2 running backs. Now, last week, he had 11 carries, 109 yards, although you have to be careful. Those numbers are a little deceiving. He did have one 75-yard run at the end of the game that really kind of boosted up his statistics, and that was, if you watch the game, it was late in the game. They load the box. They're trying to run the clock out, and he busted through and ran for 75 yards. You take that one play away, and he didn't look that great. So here's what those two running backs do. They really bleed value from one another, make it hard to depend on either one of those at this point. If you had to start them, I would say they both sit about a wide receiver 3 to 4, depending upon your league size, scoring, your bench depth, etc. Neither one of those are guys you could really trust. You probably have to give a slight bump in value to DeMarco Murray simply because they use him in the passing game and he gets more of the goal line carries. Let's look at the Titans. The Titans allow the 14th fewest points to running backs. Now, Adrian Peterson sat last game with a neck injury, and what would have been a great matchup for him, he would have had a huge game, but he sat it out with a neck injury. If you look at Adrian, he really performs in proportion to the quality of the rush defenses he faces. If he plays good run defense, he struggles. If he plays weaker run defenses, he usually excels. I'd say Adrian this week has running back value 3 in this game. Now, that's if he plays. He's questionable today, and it would appear from the information that we're getting today that he's probably going to miss another game. And that leaves Williams in that. Williams looked good last week as he filled in for Adrian Peterson. He had a great matchup, and he went 16 carries for 97 yards. When Adrian returns, he will become the lead back there. If you look at Williams minus that little performance he had last game, he really hasn't been that great this year. So that's kind of how that shakes out there. As far as wideouts go, the Cardinals give up the 13th most points to wide receivers. Corey Davis just hasn't done enough as a rookie to even be considered. He's not warrant starting at all, so sit him. Rashard Matthews may come back. Now, if he does come back, he's a team #1 wideout if he plays, although he's still questionable. He plays as a wide receiver 3, no higher. Now, the one thing that concerns me about Matthews who comes back in this game is even though Arizona allows a lot of points to wide receivers, he's going to see a lot of Patrick Peterson. So they may have a lot of yards to the wide receivers. They may spread it out to other wideouts in that game. But there's a chance that Rashard Matthews plays in a good matchup but doesn't have a great game. Look at Larry Fitzgerald here. Now, Larry Fitzgerald plays the Titans, who give up the 8th most points to wide receivers. Larry's a wide receiver 1 must start this week. You need to start him in a great matchup. I would sit all other Cardinals wide receivers, J.J. Nelson, John Brown, Jerome Brown. Doesn't matter. You can't trust them. They don't get enough targets from week to week to trust any one of those guys in that offense. As far as tight ends in this game goes, Delaney Walker, he's questionable, but he's been questionable all year long. He keeps playing through these injuries. Everything would seem to appear that he's going to play this week, and if he plays, you need to start him in this matchup. And then Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end for the Cards. He's becoming a consistent contributor and a starter there. The team really likes him. He's a good play. He's a little risky because he is a rookie and his body of work is not that large, but he's a clear-cut tight end that the Cardinals are going to now in that pass offense, so you can play him. As far as kickers go, both kickers, Dawson and Suckup, are start-worthy. As far as defenses go, the Cardinals give up the 5th most points at defense, and right now, said the Cardinals give the 5th most points to defenses, and the Titans defense is playing pretty well. They've actually had 12 sacks the last 2 games, so the Titans are worth a good start. The Cardinals are a fair play, but not a great play. I'd say they stand about the middle third as far as defenses go. The Redskins versus the Chargers. Let's look at quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins. Now he's playing the Chargers, who give up the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks. The Chargers defense is playing really well. In fact, their defense has gotten back into contention out there in the West. You got Bosa, Ingram, Hayward. They have a lot of good defensive players there, so they're a very good bunch. I think one of the things we study it out, I think that it's really hurt right now. Last couple games, kind of taking a step back. Kirk Cousins, I think he really misses Chris Thompson in that offense. He was a great running back out of the backfield. If you look, he's got 3 interceptions the last 2 games. Kirk Cousins has. Yet he's too good to sit at this point. For a lot of you out there, you're not going to have another viable option. Kirk Cousins is the best that you're going to have, and so you're going to have to start him. Here's what I would say you could expect for him. 225 yards, 2 TDs, and interceptions, about his ceiling for this game. As far as Phillip Rivers goes, he plays Washington. Washington gives up the 15th most points to quarterbacks. Now, last 4 weeks, Phillip Rivers really kind of hit his groove. He's averaging over 300 yards passing per game, and during that stretch, he's got 8 touchdown passes to only 1 interception, so he's looking a lot better. You need to start Phillip Rivers in this game. As far as running backs go, Washington gives up the 12th most points to running backs. So Melvin Gordon's a guy that you need to start as a running back too. But if you take a look at Melvin Gordon, he's a running back too. You need to start. But he really hasn't turned the corner. Last year, it looked like he had a stretch of games where he was really starting to tear it up, really kind of seemed to find himself in the league. But for whatever reason, he's kind of fallen back to his old numbers. In the 3 leagues that he's been in, 3 years he's been in the league, his yards per carry have never been over 4, so he's a guy that just isn't there quite yet. So he's a lead back that you need to start, but he's a running back too in this one. Austin Eckler, I know that he's been an attractive pick for some of you in PPR leagues, but there's not enough volume there to really trust. As long as Gordon is a starting back, I won't even bother starting Austin Eckler. Now the Chargers allow the 7th most points to running back. So you look at Samaje P. Ryan in this one. He's a strong star as a running back too. He's looking good. He's the only back that they really have at this point. So Samaje P. Ryan is the guy that you can start as a running back too. As far as wideouts go in this game, now the Redskins give up the 5th fewest points to wide receivers. So the Redskins are tough to wide receivers, but Keenan Allen is playing lights out. So what do you do with that one? Even in a tough matchup, yes, he's going to see Norman. Josh Norman will be the corner that's going to see him most likely in that. Yeah, he's playing so well. In fact, if you look at the last 3 games, here's what Keenan Allen has done. 12 catches, 159 yards. 11 catches, 172 yards. 10 catches, 105 yards, and 4 TDs during that stretch. So he's still wide receiver 1. Don't expect him to do what he's done the last 3 weeks. Obviously, Josh Norman in that defense is going to slow him down quite a bit, but he's too good not to play. Expect somewhere along lines of 6 catches, 85 yards, and a TD. I would sit all other Chargers wide receivers. Look at the Chargers. They get the 9th fewest points to wide receivers. Now you look at Jamison Crowder. He's become Cousins' favorite target the last 5 games that he's played. But I would downgrade him to wide receiver 3 this week in that matchup. As far as Grant and Doxson go, they're wide receiver 4s. They're not great plays in this matchup. As far as the tight ends that go in here, Washington gives the 4th most points to tight ends. Hunter Henry had he has a great matchup going into this week, and then the last 2 weeks he's played really well. Hunter Henry's really gotten involved back in that offense. He had 5 catches, 75 yards. He followed that up with 7 catches, 81 yards. So Hunter Henry's a tight end you need to start. As far as Davis and Reed go, sounds like Reed's going to miss another game. It leaves Vernon Davis. Now Vernon Davis had looked really good for a while there. In the last 2 weeks he's come back down to earth in matchups that were very friendly for matchups that we felt like he could have performed and he didn't. Now he plays the Chargers, are very tough against tight ends, so I'd say Vernon Davis is kind of a risky play out there right now for you. As far as kickers go, Travis Coons came in at a big week. Here's another good matchup. Started him. I would sit Rose. I would play the Chargers defense, and I would sit Washington's defense in this one. Let's look at the Eagles versus the Rams. Let's look at Jared Goff. Jared Goff is a mid-range play against Philadelphia that allows 11th fewest points to quarterbacks. He's a decent play. He's not a great play, but Jared Goff is a guy that you could start as kind of a mid-range play. As far as Carson Wentz goes, now he plays the Rams. The Rams allow the 6th fewest points to quarterbacks, but Carson Wentz is too good to sit. You need to play Carson Wentz. He's a great quarterback. As far as running backs in this go, let's look at LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi in this. Now, that's a running back by committee, and it's kind of ugly there. Now, what happened last week is Jay actually had more snaps than any other running back on that team. He looked good. A lot of people are beginning to speculate that the reason why he had the most snaps is that he's finally learned the offense, that Doug Peterson's comfortable, and he's going to take over as a lead back. That may be the case. I'm certain he's got a lot of talent. I'm certain that he can be a great running back there, but that's a lot of speculation. If you look, he still doesn't have a ton of carries. I would say Jay Ajayi sits as a running back 3 with a lot of potential and a high ceiling, but with a low floor. I would sit LeGarrette Blount at this point. As far as Todd Gurley goes, you can start Todd Gurley. He's a running back 1. Even in tough matchups, you need to play him all the time. He's highly involved. Even if they shut down the run, he's great in the passing game. He's got a lot of touchdowns. He brings all 3 facets of the game there for you as far as the fantasy owner goes. As far as wideouts in this game go, the Eagles give up the 15th most points to wide receivers. So look at Cooper Kupp. He's taken over really as a possession receiver with Robert Woods, who's been out with an injury. You need to start him as a wide receiver 2 in this matchup, and he has a little bit more value in PPR leagues, a little less value in standard leagues because he's not getting a lot of touchdowns. He's not getting a lot of looks in the red zone. And that brings us to Sammy Watkins in this one here. Now, I'll start Sammy Watkins as a wide receiver 3. He doesn't get a lot of targets. He's kind of the opposite of Cooper Kupp. He doesn't get a lot of catches, but he's had 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games, so he's worth a look. He's seen that pay dirt a lot. So Sammy Watkins as a wide receiver 3. Let's take a look at the wide receivers for Philadelphia. Look at Nelson Aguilar. Last week he blew up. He had 7 catches, 141 yards. He's got 7 TDs on the year, so those numbers look really good, right? The problem with he's inconsistent. You really can't trust him. He's only averaging 3 catches per game for the entire year, and he's only averaged 49 yards per game. So he's really what I would call touchdown-dependent wide receiver, so there's a lot of risk in playing him. He's a wide receiver 3 to 4 against the Rams, who allow the 8th fewest points to wideouts. Alshon Jeffrey, you need to start him. Now, he is their number 1 wideout, but in this matchup against a tough Rams defense, he sits as wide receiver 2 in fantasy. As far as tight ends go, Zach Ertz, he's in concussion protocol, and everything would seem to indicate he's probably going to miss the game this week. He also has a tough matchup against the Rams, who allow the 7th fewest points to tight ends. If he starts, you need to play him because he's Zach Ertz. He's a good tight end. He's quality. What I would probably, just in case, do is I would begin to look elsewhere and pick up a tight end for this matchup. He's probably going to miss. The Rams tight ends, they have a great matchup. Philadelphia actually allows a lot of points to tight ends, but none of those tight ends for the Rams are trustworthy. If you have to start a Rams tight end, I would go Tyler Higbee as the guy to trust, but probably not a great play for you. As far as kickers go, start Elliott and start Greg Zuerlein. Greg Zuerlein is having an amazing year. You need to start him. Start both defenses are good in this game, although they have bad matchups. Both these defenses are really good defenses, but neither one of those quarterbacks give up a lot of sacks or interceptions, so you need to start them, but lower your expectation. Let's look at the Jaguars versus the Seahawks at this point. Well, Russell Wilson is a must start. Now, this is really tough to say that because playing the Jags are the best defense in football, hands down. But the question is, unless you have another top 5 quarterback out there, you're really not going to sit Russell Wilson. I highly doubt that you have Tom Brady and Russell Wilson. Okay, if you do, then obviously start Tom Brady, but you probably don't, so you need to start Russell Wilson. He's playing so well right now. In the last 7 games, he's averaging over 25 fantasy points per game. So go ahead and start him, but understand that he's probably not going to have a great game. He's going against a very tough defense. As far as Blake Bortles go, Blake Bortles had 2 good games this year. If you take those 2 games out of there, he's really struggled all year long. Now he plays Seattle, who allows the 9th fewest points to quarterbacks. Yes, Cam is out. Yes, Sherman is out. But they still put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, so you need to sit Blake Bortles in this game. As far as running backs go, Seattle allows the 4th fewest points to running backs. So you look at Leonard Fournette. He's a lead back. He is very talented. He's a must start, but he falls as a running back 2 this week. Mike Davis. Now, Mike Davis is a popular pick for a lot of you out there. People are going to pick him up. They're excited on the waiver wire. I know everybody's excited for that. But I just want to caution you, be very careful about getting too excited and trusting in him in this week. One, it's still a team that has struggled to run the ball all year, playing the best defense in football, hands down. That doesn't make Davis a strong play. So for a lot of you, you're probably going to need to pick him up. You may need to play him. For some of you, he might be a flex option. But I think you need to be careful. Lower your expectation. He's a running back 3 this week. As far as wideouts go, the Jags give up the fewest points to wide receivers. The Jaguar defenses do. So that downgrades Doug Baldwin to a wide receiver 2 to 3. He's a wide receiver 3 in standard leagues. He's a wide receiver 2 in PPR leagues. Sit all other wide receivers for Seattle. Surprisingly, Seattle gives up the 10th most points to wideouts. So Marquez Lee, if you look at 5 of the last 7 games, he's had quality fantasy starts. That makes him a decent play this week. And D.D. Westbrook is another guy that you could actually play as a fair play. I would say he falls down to the wide receiver 3 to 4 category. He's had 25 targets the last 3 games, and his yardage totals have gone up 3 weeks in a row. Last week was his highest yardage total, so he's a guy that they talked a lot about in preseason. He's looked really good, and so he might be somebody that you could sneak in there. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the Jaguars tight ends. They need to start Jimmy Graham. He's got 9 touchdowns on the year. He's Wilson's favorite red zone target. He's a must play. As far as kickers go, Walsh and Lambeau are good plays. Or not great plays, I should say, but they're fair plays. They're guys that you can play. Expected maybe 8 to 9 points. Don't expect a big day out of them. Start both defenses here. But yeah, don't expect the Jaguars to have some of the games that they've had in the past. They're still good defense, but you need to temper your expectation. The Ravens versus the Steelers. Look at Ben Roethlisberger. Now, they're playing the Ravens who give the fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, if you take a look at, they kind of padded those numbers against some bad quarterbacks, and Ben has been playing a lot better as of lately. So I think he looks a lot better. He's trending better. Now, here are some concerns I have for Ben Roethlisberger in this game. Antonio Brown's got a toe injury. He was questionable last Monday night. Now, he did play, and he did play well, but you got to keep an eye on that. Obviously, if Antonio Brown sits, that's a huge, huge setback for Ben and that offense. Now, if you need to consider, Juju Smith-Schuster has been suspended for this game. So here's what I would say. If Antonio Brown plays, start Ben Roethlisberger. If he sits, I would sit Ben and look elsewhere. As far as Joe Flacco goes, last week we kind of said we expected a decent start from him, and he went out and he actually did pretty well. But now he plays the Steelers will get the 3rd fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, in 12 games this year, Flacco's touchdown intercept ratio has been 11 touchdown passes to 11 interceptions. He hasn't been great. In fact, he's not even averaging a touchdown per game. I would sit Joe Flacco against a tough Steelers defense. As far as running backs go, Le'Veon Bell, that's a no-brainer. Just start him. Doesn't matter who he's playing. He's matchup-proof. Start him. Alec Collins, the guy that we've talked a lot about, he's looked really good. He faces Pittsburgh, allows the 8th fewest points to running backs. On the year, Alec Collins has yards per carry of 4.9, looked really good. He's had 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. Start him as a running back 2. Now, I will say this. He is questionable. He's having issues with migraines after the game. In fact, the coach was concerned. So you need to monitor that. If he ends up sitting, you could start Danny Woodhead, but only start Danny Woodhead in PPR leagues. As far as the wideouts go here, start Antonio Brown. That's a no-brainer. Whenever he plays, you start him. He's another one that's matchup-proof. I would sit all other wideouts in this game. As far as tight end go, I would sit all other tight ends in this game. I would start Tucker and Boswell, and I would play both defenses. Dolphins versus the Patriots. Let's take a look at this one, our final game here. Start Tom Brady. He's Tom Brady. Some of you feel like he's the greatest of all time. You certainly argue that if you wanted to. He's a great quarterback and you need to start him. And I would sit Jay Cutler. Now, on paper, it would look like he's got a great matchup against New England, who's allowed a lot of points to quarterbacks. But that goes back to the first 5 or 6 games of the year. Since then, this defense has been lights out. In fact, since week 4, this defense has only allowed 11.88 points per game. They're playing great right now. Sit Jay Cutler. As far as running backs go, we like Drake. In fact, last week against a stout Denver defense, he had 23 carries, 121 yards. We advised a lot of you that you should start him last week. We hope you followed our advice. He did really well. He's got a lot of talent. He had a chance to finally showcase that talent. So you need to start him here against New England. As far as Lewis and Rex go, this is a running back by committee. But since New England has such a prolific offense, you can actually start both of those guys and feel fairly safe. Now, what I would say with those guys, they've both been very productive and a very good offense. They have safe floors, they have high floors, but they have low ceilings because they just don't get the volume of carries and targets. You're not going to see either one of them probably break over 15 carries per game. As far as wideouts go in here, Miami's actually tough against wide receivers. You need to start Cooks. Now, many of you drafted Cooks as a wide receiver 1, but in reality, he's really been playing as a wide receiver 2 all year, and that's what he sits going into this week as a wide receiver 2. And I would start Jarvis Landry as a wide receiver 2. He's got 6 TDs on the year. He's the most dependable and reliable receiver there. I would sit Devontae Parker. That guy has disappeared. What a disappointment. I know a lot of people, myself included, thought this was going to be the breakout year for him. It just hasn't happened. We're not sure what's going on there. And you can start Stills in this game. Now, right now, Stills is really the number 2 guy there. It's Landry, Stills, and after that, it's Devontae Parker. In terms of fantasy goes, this is a game where I'd imagine Miami's going to have to play from behind, throw the ball a lot, so Stills has value. As far as tight ends go, Gronk is suspended. And then you've got Allen, their other tight end, and he's really struggled all year long. He really struggled, and Bennett's on the IR. So I think what's going to happen is those targets that went to some of those tight ends, we're going to see that go to targets like White and other running backs. So I don't really advise starting any tight ends for New England at this point. Julius Thomas is a low-range guy that you could start. He's got a decent play. I would sit Miami's kicker, and I'd start Gostkowski. I would sit Miami's D and start New England. Starting New England's defense, they're a great play going into this week. So it's a lot of information. Sorry, I'm going to continue trying to work on improving the product, quality, voice, sound, these sort of things, information. I'm just going to get through this year as we tweak things. We're going to continue taking the feedback that you have given us and just doing a better job bringing you the most up-to-date information so that you can go ahead and be successful at fantasy football. If you have any questions, put at the bottom of the video. We'll answer them for you. God bless and take care.